In this tutorial, you will learn to create a realistic neon text effect in Photoshop. We'll use materials to create the brick background and layer styles to create the neon effect. Make sure to stick around to the very end, you will learn a lot. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Let's jump right into it. First, create the background. We'll use materials for that. Go into Window and choose Materials. Materials can help you create photorealistic surfaces with customizable attributes. They're similar to the old Photoshop patterns, but with controls for limitless variations. From this panel, you can see all the available materials. You can also search for a material by typing a keyword on the search bar. I'll type brick. Then click on this material to add it to your project. From the Material Properties panel, you have dozens of settings to control the material's appearance. In this case, I'm going to change the resolution, which is currently set to medium, to ultra. That way I get the highest resolution available for this material. Then I can scroll down and make other adjustments. For example, I can check the Repeat Uniformly box so that I can scale the material. 1 is the current size of the material. Any higher number will give us smaller bricks, and any lower number will give us larger bricks. I want the bricks to be a little bit larger, so I can just type in here 0.75, hit enter or return, and Photoshop will enlarge the bricks. Also, you can adjust how the bricks look by adjusting the brick color or by selecting a preset from the dropdown. But in this case, I like the default colors, and that's what we'll use in this tutorial. The next thing you want to do is click on this icon to collapse the layer just so we have a little more room to work with. We don't need this background layer, so I'll just delete it. Next, let's add a few adjustments to make the background work better for the neon text. I'm going to create a hue and saturation adjustment layer, and I'll press Ctrl-Alt-G on Windows to create a clipping mask. Even though it's not necessary, there's no other layers below, I still like to clip layers to make sure that I know that this adjustment layer is controlling the background. Also, a new habit of mine is to delete the layer masks if we don't need them. That way, we don't get confused with the layer mask. So we have the hue and saturation adjustment layer controlling the background. And we'll desaturate the layer to about -50. This looks pretty good. Next, I'll create a curves adjustment layer to add contrast to this image. Another way of creating a clipping mask is by clicking on this icon. You can of course use the same keyboard shortcut if you like. And again, I'll delete the layer mask. And what I'll do in this case is darken the image to create more contrast. By the way, there's something I want to point out. When you make an adjustment with the curves adjustment layer, you inadvertently add saturation to the image. The blending mode is currently set to normal. Watch what happens when I change normal to luminosity. The image gets darker, but it doesn't add saturation to the image. So that's what we want. Normal, the image gets darker and the curves adjustment layer adds saturation, but with luminosity, we don't. So I rather keep that, and I'll click on this icon to reset that curve. You can then drag this top right point down. This is the white output. Set that to 165, which will make white this light shade of gray. This is white up here, and it is now this shade of gray, which makes the image darker. To darken the image a bit more and give it more contrast, click here in the center and drag down. I'm going to put all these layers in a group by clicking on the top one, holding Shift and clicking on the bottom one to select all the layers, and then pressing Ctrl-G, and I can just call this background. It's always a good idea to stay organized when you're working in Photoshop. So now we have our background image. Again, you can of course use a photo if you like. Now that we have a background, let's work on creating the neon sign. Again, if you're enjoying this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Start by selecting the rectangle tool from the toolbar. From the options bar, make sure that shape is selected and create a rectangle. Your rectangle can be any size you like, but I already have a size predetermined. I'm going to click on this icon to unlink the width from the height, and my rectangle will be 126 pixels wide by 246 tall. Then with the move tool selected, I can center my rectangle. Click on this icon here and make sure that align to is set to canvas, and click on this icon to center horizontally and click on this one to center vertically. And now the rectangle is right in the center. Then from the properties panel, you can click on the fill swatch and remove the fill and add a white stroke. Make the stroke about 8 pixels. Then drag on these icons to round the corners. About 66 pixels should work. Then I can double click to the side of the layer to bring up the layer style window, And we're going to add layer styles to create the neon sign effect. To make sure that you're looking at the same thing I am, click on the FX icon and make sure that you reset to the default list, and this is what you should see. The first thing that we're going to add is an outer glow, which does exactly what the name says. It makes it seem like the layer is glowing. I'm going to increase the opacity just a little bit. In this case, about 75% should work. And I'm going to click on the swatch here to add a color. I already have a color predetermined. All you need to do is drag the hue slider up to 200 degrees, or you can use the input box. Then set the saturation to 100 and the brightness to 100. Then press OK. We can then increase the size to about 13 pixels. The spread at 0 will work. And to make this blend better with the layers below, we need to change the blending mode from screen to linear dodge add. Once we apply it, the glow shines on the background better. Next, we'll intensify the glow effect, but unfortunately, we cannot add another glow like we can with other layer styles. Notice the plus icon. Other layer styles could be duplicated, but not the glow. So we'll use a drop shadow instead to enhance the glow. First, change the blending mode from multiply to linear dodge add, which creates a glow instead of a shadow. And we'll add the same color. So we'll make the saturation 100, the brightness 100, and the hue will be 200, which is the same blue, and I'll press OK. Then make sure the angle is set to 90 and uncheck Use Global Light, because some of these layer styles will have lighting from different angles. And you can increase the opacity to 100%. And notice how that creates that glowing effect. We also need to increase the size. And notice that as we increase the size, we create the illusion of having more of that atmospheric light, which looks fantastic. In this case, we'll go all the way up to 250. And I think we need to increase the spread a little bit and also the distance. So what we'll do is change the distance to 0 and increase the spread. And a spread of about 15% should work great in this case. What I'll do now is click on this icon to duplicate that shadow effect. And this drop shadow, the one I just created, I'm going to change a few of the settings. I'm going to bring the opacity down to 50% and I'll change the size to 90. And it creates the effect that you see there. So this is before and after. It just helps create more of a realistic glow, and it also shows you that you can stack layer styles on top of each other to create better effects. Next, we need to create some of the shadows that will be casted by this light. The neon light is not directly over the brick wall. There is some space between it, so we would see some shadows. So let's recreate that effect. What I'm going to do now is duplicate this drop shadow, and I'm going to change the color to black, press OK, change the blending mode to multiply, and I'll make the opacity 75. And we can adjust the distance. I can increase the distance and you can see the shadow directly below there. Before we continue adjusting the distance, I think it'll be easier to see if we adjust the spread. We can make the spread 0 and the size about 20 or so. And you can see the shadow much better here. And this is what I want. And now I can adjust the distance if I need to. And actually, now that I see it, the distance was pretty good where it was. So I guess I can come back to about 36 or 35 pixels. And that looks fantastic. We have this shadow here at the bottom. What we need to do now is create a shadow that goes on top because we have this light going around in a circle. So theoretically, we would have shadows going up, down, left, and right. In this case, we're just going to add a shadow on top, and I think that will help sell the illusion. So I can click on this icon to duplicate that shadow, and I'm just going to make one change here. I'm going to add a minus sign before that 90, and you can see that we now have a shadow on top, which looks great. And I can reduce the opacity a little bit. We can try 65, and I think that's okay. Maybe we can go a little bit lighter. We can do 60% just so that the shadows are a bit different and not 100% the same. And I think this is looking pretty good. And we can now press OK and see our result. Again, just like I did earlier, I'm going to click on this icon to collapse the effects to have a little more room to work with here in the layers panel. Now we can start working with text. Enable the horizontal type tool and select the font. I'm going to select an Adobe stock font that I installed earlier called Handsome. So let me scroll down and find it, and it is right here, Handsome Pro. Handsome Pro is a fantastic font. You can get it from fonts.adobe.com. And the reason that I went for this font is because it has a nice script effect. It looks like cursive writing and it has different weights and it'll work great for the neon sign that we're going to use. So feel free to use any font you like. This is the one that I'm using. Then make sure that you create your text layer outside of the text box. If you click in the text box, you can see how the icon changes. We don't want to create a text box or to type along a path. So I'm going to create the text away from the rectangle. And I'll type the word neon. Make sure that you don't have your caps lock button on, just so that you avoid any issues. And this is what we're going to work with. The font weight that I'm going to use will be a different one. So with my neon text selected, I can do this from the properties panel under character. I can change the bold to thin just to get a thinner text like so. And I can change the font weight to 346. And I think that's a pretty good size. I'll press the V key on the keyboard to enable the move tool, and I can place this into position, or I can use that same trick I showed you earlier. Click on the three dots, make sure you align to canvas, and click on the center buttons to center the image into place, like so. But in this case, I don't want it centered directly into the canvas. I'm gonna move it up slightly. So I'm gonna drag this up right about there, and I think that looks pretty good. And what I'm going to do now is go back into the rectangle, create a layer mask, and go into the brush tool. Make sure that the brush tool has a regular round brush, hardness set to 100, and you can increase the size and paint with black on that mask so that we hide some of the neon sign from this part. Also, make sure that your flow and opacity are set to 100. And I'm just going to paint that out like so. Then make white your foreground color and use the left bracket on the keyboard to reduce your brush size. And I'll just paint that back in right about there. And I just want to make sure I get a rounded edge like so. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. Something like that. Now I'm going to copy the layer styles from the rectangle onto the word neon. To do so, you can hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click and drag the FX icon over onto the text layer. When you drop it, Photoshop will apply the same effect over onto the text, but we're going to make a few adjustments to make the text red. First, I'll start with the outer glow. I'm just gonna go in here and click on outer glow and change the color to red. Just go all the way to the top, make that red, and press OK. And I might wanna bring the opacity down just a little bit, so I'll make that 40%. I think this is good for now. Now let's change the color of the ambient color, which I believe are the last two drop shadows here. This is one and this is the other. With this bottom one, we can change the color to red, press OK, and I'll do the same thing on the other one so that we can actually see what's going on. So I'll make them red first. And as you can see, the glow is a little too strong. So let's change that. On this one on top, I can increase the size a little bit. I'll make it 136, and I'll even increase the opacity. I'll make it 65%. And the one on the bottom, I can change the size to 50 and the opacity to 50 as well. And that creates that effect that you see there. I'll press OK, and I'll collapse the layer styles. Let's now add more atmosphere to this image to make it look more realistic. But before I do that, I'm going to put these two layers into a group, and I can call this group Neon Sign. And that way everything is organized and in its own group. Then I'll create a new layer, and I'm going to show you a trick here. If you go into Filter and select Render, you can go to Render Clouds. The Render Clouds will create clouds based on your foreground and background color, currently black and white, which is what I want. Notice that if I invert this by pressing Control-I, Command-I on the Mac, I basically get the same thing, not much difference. I want more contrast on these clouds. So how do I do that? Well, you can, of course, create contrast with a curves adjustment layer, levels adjustment layer, something like that. Or you can go into Filter, Render, and then hold the Alt key on Windows, that's the Option key on the Mac, as you click on clouds, and notice that you get clouds with more contrast. And this is exactly what I want. More contrast with my clouds, and I can change the blending mode to the blending mode we've been using this whole time, Linear Dodge Add, and I can go into the Hue and Saturation Adjustment layer, and we're going to delete the layer mask because we don't need it, and we're gonna clip this to the layer below, Control-Alt-G, The down pointing arrow indicates that this adjustment layer is only affecting the clouds. And I can just call this layer smoke/atmosphere because that's what this layer is. And then what I'm going to do is click on colorize and then bring the lightness down like so and increase the saturation and change the hue to a color that matches the color of your neon sign. In this case, the blue. I'm really worried about the blue, not the red. So maybe something like that, increase it and adjust it to whatever you think will work. Then on your smoke atmosphere layer, hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click on the layer mask icon to create an inverted mask, which is black, and it will hide everything on the layer. Then increase your brush size, reduce the hardness, and then I will reduce the opacity and also the flow, and then just paint with white on this mask some of that smoke back in, and you can sort of paint it in somewhat randomly, just around this area like so. And you can see from the layer mask thumbnail here what I'm doing. And in this case, I think I might have brought down the flow and opacity a bit too much, so I'll increase both, and I'll continue painting like so. And this is just the atmosphere around that neon sign. And if the effect is too strong, you can do two things. You can paint with black to reduce it by hiding some of those pixels, or you can bring the opacity down as well. Totally up to you how you decide to do that. But this helps create the illusion that there's light and there's smoke. Maybe this is outside of a bar or something like that, and people are smoking, or just a foggy night. Whatever it is, it just helps sell the illusion there's light emitting from here. Then what you can do is hold Shift, click on the top layer, then click on the bottommost group, right click, and convert it into a smart object so that everything is contained as a smart object, and we can apply a camera raw filter to make this look even better. So go into filter, camera raw filter. From here, you can reduce the temperature to make things look a little cooler, like so. You can increase the contrast, adjust the shadows and highlights to make this image look more dramatic. And what I'll do is I'll go down to the effects panel, and from the effects panel, I'm going to reduce the vignetting slider just so that we can really focus on that neon sign, add a little bit of grain, maybe about 11. And from the basics panel, you can also increase the vibrance to increase the saturation of lowly saturated pixels. And of course, I can go into the color mixer and adjust individual colors. So for example, if I wanted to reduce the saturation of the red, I can do that here, or increase it, or adjust the hue a little bit just to get different results. Whatever you want to do, you can do from this panel. And you can press OK, and you can see the before and the after. Going to camera raw really makes the image pop. Also, the advantage of putting everything into a smart object is I can now double click on this smart object thumbnail, and I can make adjustments to this design, and it will update on the smart object. For example, I can zoom in, and I can add the metal brackets that hold up the neon sign. I can simply go into the ellipse tool and make a circle that is just a little bit larger than the neon sign, something like that, and then double click to the side of the layer, add a bevel and emboss, adjust it accordingly. By the way, uncheck global light, and maybe add a little bit of a contour here, and we can just adjust this accordingly so that we have something that looks good in terms of it being a metal bracket. I think something that we need to do also is add a bit of a texture here, and then just change the texture. The texture is probably not that important as long as you have something that looks good there. Maybe add a color overlay, and we'll make it a darker gray, like so. Press OK, and just adjust this accordingly so that it looks like it's metal or some sort of fixture holding this up. And then you can just, of course, adjust this any way you want. The depth here on this texture might be a little too much, so maybe I can reduce it a little bit like so. I just want to get some detail in there. Whatever looks good to your eye. Once you have that, something that looks like that, you can place it behind the neon sign. So what you can do is you can click and drag, of course, but instead what I'm going to do is hold Control and tap on the left bracket key to move the layer down in the layer stack like so. And basically the end result will be something like that. Then place it anywhere you think the bracket for the neon sign would be. One could be here. Then you can duplicate it by holding Alt and dragging down and placing it in a new location. And then I can select both of these, again by holding Shift and clicking on them, and holding Alt and drag to the right to duplicate those and create more of those brackets like so. And then you can select one bracket and place it over in the areas where you think the neon sign will have some of those brackets. And now I'm using the arrow keys on the keyboard to nudge the bracket. Then continue duplicating the brackets as you see fit. When you're done, you should have something that looks like this, and press Ctrl S to save. And when you go back into your working document, those adjustments we made will be applied to the final image with the camera raw filter adjustment. By the way, if you create something using this technique, make sure you share it on Instagram with the hashtag PTCvids. I would love to see what you came up with.